The streets of Valaris Prime were alive with colors and noise, floating market stalls lining the wide road, alien merchants shouting in many voices, neon lights blinking above their heads. The air smelled of fried spices, engine oil, and rain that had fallen earlier in the day. Evan, a human mechanic, walked through the crowd with his hands in his pockets. His work jumpsuit was stained with grease, and his boots were worn. He had come to the city to buy parts for a broken cargo hauler, hoping to finish the repair before night. He was thinking about which shop to visit when someone bumped into him. A small figure in a shining silver coat staggered back, clutching a crystal bag that sparkled under the neon lights. Her skin was pale blue, her eyes like molten gold. She was clearly rich and clearly annoyed. "Watch where you're going, human," she snapped. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the noise of the market. Before Evan could answer, she looked him up and down with disgust. "This bag is worth more than you," she said loudly. Several bystanders laughed. Some whispered to each other. Evan felt heat rise in his face, but he said nothing. He had dealt with arrogance before, and arguing here would only feed the crowd's amusement. Instead, he took a slow step back. But as he looked at the crystal bag, something caught his eye. A small black dot was stuck near the lower edge, too perfectly round to be a flaw. It was a tracker, military grade. His mechanic's mind recognized it instantly. Evan opened his mouth to warn her, but she had already turned away. She walked toward a sleek hovercar waiting by the curb. The driver, a tall alien with silver horns, opened the door for her without a word. She climbed in, and the car lifted silently into the air. Evan's gaze followed it until it vanished into the distance. The crowd returned to their shopping, but he stayed still. His gut told him something was wrong. Trackers like that were not for decoration. Someone was watching her, maybe even following her. A loud noise snapped him out of his thoughts from the far end of the street. A group of armed aliens pushed through the market. Their armor was black and scratched, their faces hidden behind mirrored visors. Each carried a short plasma rifle, and their movements were fast and purposeful. They were not here to shop. Evan realized they were hunters. Their eyes or visors scanned the street, matching someone to a signal, and he knew exactly who that someone was. Without thinking, he began to move, weaving through the crowd in the direction the hovercar had gone. The hunters moved too, their leader tapping a wrist device. A faint beeping sound echoed from it, confirming Evan's fear. They were following the tracker. The market grew quieter as people noticed the armed group. Stalls closed quickly, and sellers disappeared into the shadows. Evan kept his pace steady, trying not to draw attention. He didn't know why he cared. The heiress had insulted him, treated him like dirt, but leaving her to them felt wrong. Turning a corner, he spotted her hovercar ahead, parked strangely in the middle of an empty crossroad. The driver stood outside, arguing with three masked figures. Leora, he assumed that was her name. Judging by the way one attacker called out, was still inside the car, her golden eyes wide with shock. One of the masked aliens smashed the side window. Reaching in, they grabbed her arm. She screamed, trying to pull away. Her crystal bag fell to the street, rolling into the gutter. Evan's legs moved before his mind caught up. He ran toward them, his boots slamming against the wet pavement. The driver tried to fight, but was knocked to the ground. Another attacker reached into the car and dragged Leora out completely. She kicked and yelled, "Do you know who I am?" But they didn't care. The leader raised his rifle, aiming it at her head. Evan didn't think. He lunged forward, swinging a heavy metal spanner from his belt. The weapon smashed into the leader's helmet, sending him stumbling back. The other two turned on him, firing wild shots that scorched the air. Evan grabbed Leora's wrist, pulling her away from the car. She resisted for a moment, still glaring at him like he was beneath her, but the sound of charging plasma rifles made Her move. They ran into a narrow side alley. Blaster fire chasing them. The air was damp and smelled of rust. Evan could hear the hunters shouting to each other. He didn't know how far they would chase, but he knew one thing: this wasn't over. And somewhere deep inside, he also knew that from this moment, their lives were now tangled together. Evan pulled her deeper into the alley, his boots splashing through puddles left by the afternoon rain. Behind them, the sound of running footsteps grew louder. The hunters were not giving up. He glanced back and saw the reflection of their visor lights bouncing off the wet walls. Leora's breathing was sharp and fast, her silver coat dragging against the walls as they turned corner after corner. She kept looking over her shoulder, her golden eyes filled with both fear and anger. "Let go of me," she hissed, trying to yank her hand away. Evan didn't bother answering. If he let her go now, they would both be dead or worse. The alley opened into a dark maintenance tunnel, the smell of oil and old machinery heavy in the air. Pipes rattled above them as a distant hum echoed through the metal walls. Evan guided her into the shadows, pressing her back against the cold wall. He raised a finger to his lips, telling her to be silent. The hunters slowed as they entered the alley, scanning the area with their rifles raised. Red targeting beams swept across the tunnel entrance. One of them stepped forward, the others covering his sides. They moved with the precision of trained killers. Leora's breath brushed against Evan's cheek. She whispered, "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." He didn't answer right away, his eyes fixed on the moving lights. Finally, he murmured, "Because no one else will." The hunters reached the tunnel mouth, but hesitated. The one in front tapped a small device on his wrist. A faint ping answered from inside the tunnel. Evan cursed under his breath. The tracker was still on her. Before they could be spotted, he pulled her deeper into the tunnel. Metal grated under their feet, and the hum grew louder ahead. A series of service doors lined the wall. Evan tried the first one, locked. The second one creaked open, revealing a stairway that led down into darkness. They slipped inside, closing the door quietly. The stairwell smelled damp and unused, their footsteps echoing softly at the bottom. They found themselves in an old underground transit system. Dust-covered rails stretched into the distance, dim lights flickering overhead. Leora crossed her arms, her voice low but sharp. "You think I should thank you? You dragged me here without asking." Evan turned to face her, his jaw tight. "If I didn't, you'd be lying in the street right now with a hole in your head." Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. He scanned the station, looking for a way out, but the whole place felt abandoned. Only the sound of dripping water broke the silence in the shadows above the tracks. A faint mechanical hum began to grow. Evan froze. He knew that sound. Drones. Leora heard it too. She stepped closer without realizing, her voice trembling. "They found us." From the far end of the station, two small hovering drones appeared, their red eyes glowing in the dark. They floated silently toward them, scanning every inch of the platform. Evan grabbed her hand again, pulling her toward a maintenance ladder on the far wall. The metal was cold and slick, his hands slipping as they climbed. Leora followed reluctantly, her coat catching on the rungs, tearing in places. She let out a frustrated sound but kept moving. Halfway up, the drone spotted them. A high-pitched alarm echoed through the tunnel. The hum of their engines grew louder as they rose toward them. Evan climbed faster, pulling her by the arm when she lagged. At the top, they stumbled onto a narrow catwalk that ran above the station. The catwalk shook under their weight, rust falling like dust to the floor below. Evan led her toward a half-open hatch at the end, squeezing through into another cramped passage. The smell of burnt wiring filled the air, and somewhere nearby, a steam pipe hissed violently. The sound of the drones faded, but they could still hear the distant shouts of the hunters. Evan stopped, finally looking at her directly. "That bag of yours wasn't the problem. They're tracking you?" Her eyes widened slightly. "That's impossible. No one knows where I am." He shook his head. "Someone does, and they're not going to stop." For a moment, she seemed unsure of herself, the arrogance in her tone softening. "Then what do we do?" Evan glanced down the passage. "We keep moving until I figure out how to get that tracker off you." She lifted her chin slightly, as if to hide the fear in her eyes. "Fine, but you better not ruin my dress." They moved again, the passage growing narrower until they had to turn sideways to fit. The hum of the city above was faint but present, reminding them they were still under danger. Every step felt slower, heavier, as if the air itself was waiting for the next attack. When they finally emerged into a dim side street, the night sky above was filled with neon lights and the buzz of traffic. It looked normal, peaceful even, but they both knew the hunters could appear at any second. Evan didn't let go of her arm, even when she tried to pull away again. Somewhere in the shadows behind them, a visor glinted under the light. The chase wasn't over. It was only just beginning. They didn't run at first, both of them scanning the street for any sign of movement. The city noise was louder here, the air filled with the hum of hovercars, neon signs flashing in strange alien symbols above small shops, but Evan's eyes were on the dark alleys between the buildings, the places the hunters could appear from without warning. Leora pulled her coat tighter around herself, still looking annoyed even in fear. "You can let go now," she said sharply. Evan shook his head. "Not unless you want to be dead in the next 30 seconds. Her golden eyes narrowed, but she stayed silent. He led her across the street, weaving between groups of pedestrians. Blending into the moving crowd, the wet pavement reflected the neon lights, making the whole place feel like it was floating in color. A faint metallic click echoed from somewhere behind them, and Evan didn't need to look to know the hunters. "We're close." He spotted a narrow stairway leading down, half hidden between two tall buildings. Without warning, he pulled her toward it. She stumbled at first, almost losing her balance. "Where are we going?" she demanded. "Away from them," he answered, his voice low. The stairway took them into another tunnel, but this one was different from the last. It was older, the walls covered in peeling paint and faded warning signs. The air was cold, and their footsteps echoed like they were in the belly of some giant machine. Leora's gaze darted around, her voice uneasy. "I don't like this place." Evan smirked faintly. "That makes two of us ahead." The tunnel split in 3 directions. Evan stopped, listening. In the left passage, he heard dripping water. The right had the faint rumble of machinery, but the middle had nothing. No sound, no air movement, just silence. Silence was safer, at least for the moment. They took the middle path, walking deeper until the city noise faded completely. The darkness here was thicker, broken only by small emergency lights spaced far apart every few steps. Evan glanced over his shoulder, his instincts telling him they were being watched. Halfway through the passage, Leora stopped suddenly. "Wait," she whispered. Her golden eyes focused on a small glint of light on the floor. Evan crouched, picking it up. It was a tiny round lens, part of a drone camera, recently broken. The metal was still warm. "They're close," he murmured. Shoving the piece into his pocket, they pushed on, eventually finding a rusted metal door at the end of the corridor. Evan forced it open with his shoulder, and they stepped into a massive underground chamber. It looked like an abandoned subway. Repair yard, rows of old train cars sitting in darkness. "This is worse than the last place," Leora muttered. Evan ignored her. Walking between the silent train cars, looking for an exit, the ground was littered with tools, broken wires, and scattered metal parts. A sudden sound made them both freeze, a low mechanical growl from between 2 cars. A pair of glowing red eyes appeared, a guard drone, larger than the ones they'd seen before, rolled out on heavy treads. Its metal arms unfolded, each holding a weapon. Leora gasped, stepping back. But Evan grabbed her wrist again. "Run," he said simply. They sprinted between the train cars. The drone's weapons firing bursts of blue plasma, sparks rained down. As the shots hit metal, they ducked into the nearest car. Slamming the door behind them, the inside smelled of dust and oil. Dim light filtering in through cracked windows. The drone outside moved along the side of the car, searching for a way. Evan spotted a trapdoor in the floor. He pulled it open, revealing a maintenance shaft. "Go," he ordered. Leora hesitated for only a second before climbing down. Evan followed. Closing the hatch above them just as the sound of metal claws scraped against it, the shaft was cramped, barely wide enough for one person. They crawled forward, the air stale and heavy. Leora's voice was shaky now. "Is it always like this for you?" Evan gave a short laugh. "No, this is a special night." After what felt like forever, they reached a small grate. Evan pushed it open, and they climbed out into a dim service hallway. The floor was wet, and somewhere nearby, they could hear the distant roar of water rushing through pipes. He leaned against the wall for a moment, catching his breath. "We can't keep running like this. We need to deal with the tracker." Leora frowned. "And how do you plan to do that?" Evan met her gaze, his voice steady. "By getting it off you before they catch up." Her lips pressed into a thin line. She still didn't like him, but for the first time, she didn't argue. Somewhere behind them, the sound of metal treads echoed again. Closer than before, the hunters had not lost the trail. Evan pushed away from the wall, motioning for her to move. The chase was far from over, but now they were heading toward a place where he could fight back. They moved quietly down the narrow hallway, the harsh hum of the city far above, replaced by the soft drip of water and the distant clank of unseen machinery. Evan kept close to Leora, watching her carefully, noticing the way her hands trembled slightly. Though she tried to hide it, she still held on to her pride like armor. But beneath it was fear, real fear. Suddenly, the passage opened into a wide chamber filled with flickering holoscreens and strange alien devices. Lights blinked in patterns that Evan didn't understand. But one screen showed a map of the city with a blinking red dot moving steadily closer to their location. "This is where they track you," Evan whispered, pointing to the screen. Leora's golden eyes softened for the first time. "My family's rivals put that tracker on me. They want to claim my inheritance, or worse." Her voice was low, but steady. "I was sent here to be safe. But they found me anyway." Evan frowned, feeling the weight of the situation. "If they catch you, it won't just be about money, will it?" "Okay." She shook her head, biting her lip. "No, it's political. My father's enemies want to destroy him by taking me away, to force him to give up everything." The truth settled between them like a heavy fog. Evan realized this was bigger than he thought. She wasn't just a spoiled heiress, she was a pawn in a dangerous game. Suddenly, the chamber's doors hissed open, and figures stepped inside, heavily armed guards, but not the hunters chasing them. These were the insignia of Leora's father's security team. Their faces hard but familiar. One of them, a tall alien with sharp features, spoke calmly. "Miss Leora, we've been sent to extract you safely." Leora nodded, relief flooding her expression. But then she glanced at Evan. "And who is this?" Evan met their curious eyes without hesitation. "I'm the one who saved her from those kidnappers outside." His voice was steady despite the sudden tension. The guard looked him up and down, then smiled slightly. "Good. We need people like you." As they prepared to leave, Evan took a deep breath. "I still have one job, to get that tracker off her." The team's tech expert, a small alien with glowing eyes, nodded, pulling out tools. They worked quickly. cutting into the fabric of Leora's coat and carefully removing the hidden device. With the tracker gone, Leora looked different, freer somehow. She finally lowered her guard and whispered, "Thank you." Evan shrugged, just doing what's right. But even as they stepped out into the light, Evan's mind raced. He knew this was only the beginning. The real danger was still out there, waiting in the shadows, ready to strike. They stepped out from the dim underground into the heart of the city. But the streets felt different, empty and tense, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Neon signs flickered erratically above cracked sidewalks, and distant sirens wailed softly in the night air. Evan's eyes scanned the shadows where danger could be waiting. Leora moved beside him, quieter now, her usual arrogance replaced with a cautious calm. She clutched the crystal bag tightly, though the tracker was gone. The city's underworld was unforgiving, and freedom here was just another kind of trap. Suddenly, a low rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. A convoy of black hover trucks roared into view, their engines growling like beasts. Armed guards poured out, weapons drawn, blocking every escape route. Evan realized they had been expected. The leader, a tall figure with a cybernetic eye, stepped forward and sneered, going, "Somewhere, heiress." His voice was cold, filled with dark amusement. Leora's face hardened, but she didn't answer. Evan clenched his fists, ready to fight, without warning. He grabbed Leora's arm and pulled her toward a narrow alley. The guards opened fire. Blue plasma bolts sizzling against walls and pavement. They ducked behind a rusted shipping container, hearts pounding. Evan quickly scanned their surroundings. "This way," he whispered, pointing to a broken fence covered in tangled vines. They slipped through, entering an abandoned industrial area filled with silent machines and towering smokestacks. The smell of burnt metal and oil hung heavy. Leora stumbled but caught herself. "You're risking everything for me," she said, voice soft but serious. Evan shrugged. "Maybe I'm tired of people dying because no one helps." She looked at him, something unspoken passing between them. Ahead, a large warehouse loomed, its doors slightly open. Evan motioned to move inside. The building was dark, but smelled of dust and forgotten work. Inside, they found old crates and discarded equipment. A faded control panel blinked weakly on a nearby wall. Suddenly, the warehouse lights flickered on, revealing dozens of armed mercenaries surrounding them. The cybernetic-eyed leader appeared again, smirking. "Thought you could hide?" Evan's mind raced, looking for anything to use. He grabbed a broken pipe and swung it. Striking a mercenary who charged, Leora found a stack of crates and threw one at another attacker. The fight was desperate and loud, echoes bouncing off the metal walls in the chaos. Evan spotted a vent high above. "This way," he shouted, pulling Leora toward a ladder. They climbed quickly as bullets pierced the air below, emerging onto a rooftop. They gasped at the cold night sky. From here, the city stretched out like a glowing maze, but danger was still close. Drones hovered nearby, scanning for heat signatures. Evan spotted an old maintenance bridge linking to buildings. "We have to cross there," he said. Steady despite the fear, Leora nodded, trust growing in her eyes. They ran across the narrow bridge as the drones swarmed. The lights flickered wildly as Evan activated an EMP device from his belt. The drones convulsed and crashed into the street. Below, landing safely, they paused, breathless. The city's lights sparkled around them. But the war was far from over. They barely had time to catch their breath before the distant sound of sirens and shouting grew louder. The rooftop was cold and slick from the night's rain, making every step dangerous. Leora's hand found Evan's, gripping tightly as if to anchor herself. Below, the city's maze of neon and steel blurred into streaks of color. But above them, danger closed in fast. A dark shape moved swiftly across. The next rooftop, a figure clad in black armor, armed and deadly. The hunters had found them again. Evan pulled Leora behind a ventilation shaft, pressing his back against the cold metal. "We need to move," but quietly he whispered. "If they catch us now, there's no second chance." She nodded, swallowing her pride. The heiress who once yelled insults, now trusting a human mechanic to save her life. They edged along the rooftop's edge, careful to avoid broken panels and loose debris. The city stretched endlessly around them, a shining prison. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed. The hunters had set a trap. Explosions rocked the rooftop, sending sparks and shards flying. Evan grabbed Leora, pulling her to safety just as part of the rooftop collapsed, exposing the dark void below. Their pursuers appeared from the shadows, closing in with ruthless precision. But Evan had a plan. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, a homemade EMP grenade. "Cover your ears," he warned, tossing it toward the center of the rooftop. The device exploded in a burst of blue light, frying electronic systems nearby. The hunters' weapons sputtered and went dead, their drones crashing and spinning out of control, taking advantage of the chaos. Evan and Leora sprinted across the broken rooftop, leaping onto an adjoining building. As they landed, Leora stumbled and twisted her ankle. Pain shot through her leg, but she refused to fall. "Keep going," she gasped, determination burning in her eyes. Evan supported her, moving slowly but steadily toward a fire escape ladder. They climbed down into a narrow alley, the noise of the chase fading behind them. For a moment, they stopped to rest. Leora leaning against the cold brick wall. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly, her voice softer now. Evan looked at her, the weight of the night heavy on his shoulders. "Because no one deserves to be hunted like that, even if they act like they're better than everyone else." Leora smiled faintly. "Maybe you're not so worthless after all." Their bond, forged in danger and distrust, began to change into something neither expected. But the night was far from over, and the hunters would not give up easily. The first light of dawn crept over the city's horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange. Evan and Leora found themselves on the edge of an old rooftop garden. Wild plants tangled between broken concrete and rusted pipes. It was quiet here, far from the neon chaos below, but the calm was fragile. Leora looked at Evan, her eyes no longer filled with pride or anger, but with something softer, gratitude. "I never thought I'd say this," she said, "but thank you." He nodded, tired but steady. "I'm just glad you're alive." Suddenly, a sharp noise shattered the moment. A blaster shot rang out from the shadows. A figure stepped forward, cloaked and armed. The final hunter had found them, eyes cold and merciless. Evan pushed Leora behind a crumbling wall, drawing his own weapon, an old but reliable plasma pistol. The hunter advanced slowly, calculating every move. "Give her to me, and I might let you walk away," the hunter hissed, voice dripping with menace. Evan's hand tightened on the pistol. "You'll have to go through me first." The standoff stretched, time seeming to slow. Then, with a sudden roar, Evan fired. The shot hit the hunter's weapon, causing it to spark and drop. Leora sprang forward, grabbing a heavy metal pipe. She swung it with all her strength, knocking the hunter off balance. Together, Evan and Leora fought with a fierce determination born of desperation. When the hunter finally fell, motionless on the cracked rooftop, they both gasped for breath. The city was waking around them, unaware of the battle that had just been fought in its shadows. Leora stepped closer to Evan, her voice quiet but sure. "I owe you more than my life." She handed him her crystal bag, now glowing softly in the morning light. "Take this, it's worth more than you ever imagined." Evan shook his head with a small smile. "You're worth more than any bag," she laughed. The sound light and free, something Evan hadn't heard before. As the sun rose higher, they stood together. No longer heiress and mechanic, but partners who had faced danger and come through stronger. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, it held promise.